Welcome everybody. My name is Ashley Jennings-Bagay. I'm a library specialist in the Youth Services Department for the Murrieta Public Library. Today on Community Matters, I have somebody really special. It's Brian Ambrose, who is the Senior Program Manager for the City of Murrieta. He is basically Miss Elise's boss, and then also with our Parks and Recreation Department. So everything that's an umbrella, he's holding that umbrella up, and he does an amazing job. So thank you, Brian, for being here.
No problem, my honor.
Perfect. My first question, obviously, is when did you move to Murrieta? You and your family, what drew you here? Where'd you come from? Kind of how did you wind up in home?
Sure. Just start out, I actually worked in Murrieta almost a year before we actually moved here. I think I was the first person hired in the new building.
I didn't know that.
I actually did my interviews down at the Beckman Court building.
Yeah.
And at that time, if you remember, the hallways were nothing more than banker boxes.
Yeah.
And I'm interviewing, and I had known our previous city manager, Rick Dudley. I worked with him down in Vista, and he was in the interview with Nancy Driggers. And the whole time I'm looking around saying, I don't know. I just need an office. I don't need banker boxes everywhere. And I literally made Nancy Driggers give me the address of this new city hall that they were talking about. And I drove past. They actually offered me the job, and I drove up on another day just to make sure there was this actual new city hall. And so I started the day when they were still moving some things in. So that was 2008. Mm-hmm. And if you can remember 2008, there were a few of us looking at the economic indicator saying, yeah, I think this thing's going to go off a cliff. Right. My wife and I were very fortunate at that time. We were renting a house. Matter of fact, we were living with my in-laws, God bless them. And we tried for a few years to buy a house down in San Diego, and just I wasn't willing to, be so cash poor just to have a house down there. And thank God we did not. And so the job was offered to me. I took it, and it's funny when you're in San Diego area and you tell everybody you're going to be moving to Murrieta, they literally are wondering how far that is from Bakersfield or Vegas. They have no concept that I was commuting, and it only took me 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And so I commuted for the first probably 8 months. And in that 8 months, we literally didn't look for a house around here because I didn't know if we were going to have a job or not. We lost 25% of our general fund back then. It went off the cliff.
It was intense.
It was very fortunate again, and it was more dumb luck than anything. Is housing prices? They crashed. I mean, Murrieta was impacted probably more than any other area. So, in I think early 2009, we were able to purchase our home, and we'll probably never leave there because there's no reason to. It's what we got the house for was an absolute blessing. So that was 2009. Then we moved up here. I'm very fortunate. I live 1 mile from City Hall. So most people in Southern California don't get to go home for lunch, and we don't get to walk to work on the days that are really nice. And so I'm very fortunate about that. So that drew me here, because in San Diego, and before that I moved out from Virginia, you were relying on your car, as you are in most places. Whereas I'm not. I have a car. It's 2.5 years old, and I think I just I put 12,000 miles on it. So I'm lucky there. So that drew us. We knew we wanted to be close. And then the other thing that kind of drew us to this area is Murrieta is its own little bubble. And I think you don't realize that until you start working here, and especially when you move here. But between our police and our fire department, it's a bubble. I can pretty much go anywhere in the city. I can walk downtown. I can walk anywhere I want, anytime. And I am not fearful. And I grew up in Philadelphia, so that was not always the case.
Right. Yeah. I think that's what draws a lot of people out here, is just how safe it is. And it's nice that a lot of us work and live in the city. Yep. So we have a direct connection to making the city run beautifully. It's because we have a direct, what's that word I'm looking for?
Well, you take ownership. Yeah, you take ownership. Matter of fact, it just happened on Monday on my way in. I actually missed it. My wife is the one that reported, but on the way in there was some graffiti. Somebody went out late Sunday night. They tagged Center Point Church. They tagged the chiropractic office down by Charter Springs, and Charter Springs. And my wife texted me right away saying, get rid of this. And, because you take ownership of it, we go right to the person who does the graffiti removal, and they were out there within 15 minutes taking care of it. And I think that happens with our police when, if they're coaching Little League and they see something over a Cal Oaks Field or a Los Alamos, they call the patrol right away.
Yeah.
You don't have that in the contract cities, and it's unfortunate because it really makes this place a bright spot.
I think that's the key right there. Cause I do the same thing, I'm walking, in a park and I take a picture and I text it, to Mike, and I'm like, oh, forward this on. So that's what's really beautiful that we all take ownership, like you said, in that, and it continues to make the city what it is.
Yeah.
So besides taking ownership, because you said how was raising a family here, because you have young ones, shape the way that you go into work every day?
First and foremost, again, it's that public safety. Working in the homeless arena, I want to make sure the city is as nice as it possibly can be. As you mentioned, we have a lot of kids. I have 5 children at home, and so I think more than anything, I try to not let the perspective of what I do in the homeless arena affect what the other jobs over parks and the library, because I want to be just as shocked when I see a homeless person that has mental illness walking down the street talking to themselves, because, that is not normal. It really is not. It's becoming very normal in California. But by and large, it's not. Now, there's a lot of, reasons why it happens. There's a lot of lack of resources and things of that nature. But to a certain extent, I try not to allow that to impact what I do around the city. What does impact is my children, and they run the gamut from 17 down to 2. They probably know more about storm drains and street lights and city events than any person out there. And funny enough, my oldest daughter is getting ready to apply for some colleges, and she's certainly not going into the city administration field whatsoever. On. So I think at one time they thought I was pretty cool, but now it's, hey, Dad, you got to knock it off with that stuff. Matter of fact, when I just told him I was home for lunch, and one of my daughters was over here and we talked to my wife, and I mentioned I need to get back because I need to prepare for this interview. And my daughter wanted to know who I was interviewing. Was it were we interviewing for somebody to come in for a job? I said, no, the library, they want to interview me. And she did not understand that concept whatsoever. She literally said, you should be interviewing them. And it's probably a valid statement, to be honest with you.
I mean, yeah, I'm a little nervous. I mean, you're my boss's boss. So yeah, that makes me a little nervous. So she's not wrong. That's, again, it's that whole ownership, and you have kids in the city. Like, I grew up with a firefighter for a dad, and none of that shocks me. And I mean, so it just was natural for me to go into government, but at the same time, I get right where your kids are coming from. Like, oh, I'm gonna go this way.
I think that actually brings up a good point. Is most people don't realize, I don't want to use the word nepotism because it's not, but there's an extraordinary amount of staff here whose either parents have worked here, whose brother or sister works here. Both your parents work for the city.
Yeah.
At one time, Leah Kolick was basically taking direction from her mother-in-law. And it's not because it's probably because you grow up in this environment learning the city administration. Back when the city was 26,000 people, you were just looking for anybody that you could bring through the door. That's why Joey Eccles runs our youth center. He was available to be a lifeguard for a long time. But there's an extraordinary amount of relatives that work. Now, they don't report to each other. But a lot of people would say, well, that's dangerous. But the fact of the matter is, it makes a very strong community. I mean, you probably were on the fire truck with your dad when he was still fighting fires, and my children come out. My children got to watch me during the fire academy. They came out for some of that. So it makes it very interesting. And again, it's that sense of ownership.
Yeah, you grew. I mean, because my mom was with the community services department. She worked with Leah. And all these other amazing people. And the city didn't have the staff that it has now. Yeah. So, I was in high school and she said, I needed you. Here's my vendor list. Yes. So I had the experience
Yep.
And when I
No,
got
my
hired,
children have done traffic control. My
yeah,
children have, had to sit there and wait for me while I
yeah,
dealt with a homeless issue.
yeah,
They're very adept at local government and the chaos that happens.
yeah. So when I applied, they were like, my
Yep.
goodness. And I go, just give me my assignments now.
Yep.
You don't have to train me.
Basically,
And then
the
I
only
went to the
difference is now
library.
they're
It was a whole
paying
different
you
story.
for the work that you were doing.
I know they're like, wait a minute, this is backwards. But going to homelessness, because it is on a slow rise. And I remember, it's numbers, I can't remember numbers, but it is slowly growing. So you work with Homeless Services and the Regional Homeless Alliance.
Correct.
How did that change the way that you view not only city, but community? And how did that shape the way you manage community services?
Well, going back, we're very fortunate in Murrieta specifically, Riverside County, kind of in total, or at least Southwest Riverside County. But we've been very fortunate regarding the impacts of homelessness. In our area, it's actually been plateaued for a little while. As a matter of fact, we're the only 5-city region that since the formation of the Regional Homeless Alliance, homelessness, we like to claim that it's gone down, but it literally went down by one person out of like 220. So it's the same relatively.
Relatively.
Now, that being said, that same exact time frame, that 2016 or 2017 till present, in Riverside County itself, homelessness has gone up by about, I think it's 113%. So there's this big rise in Riverside County, and we're going to continue to see it because out in LA, both county and city combined, they have somewhere between 50 and 100,000 homeless, depending on which calculation you use. And you can't manage that any longer. And so what we're starting to see more and more here in our area is, hey, I was living out there and it's unsafe. And so I'm going to where it's safe and where I can panhandle and the community is overly generous and I can make a living doing so. And so we will continue to see an increase, but if we're able to start getting people off the street, as we've been very fortunate to be doing, we hope to keep those numbers plateaued, if not going down once some shelter space opens up. Now, in terms of how that kind of drives my work here, I kind of live in these different boxes. So the one thing that I know through CSD and the library is every day is a little bit of chaos. It's not the same. In the parks world, we can one day be working with police and fire on traffic control plans for the birthday bash or these huge special events. The next day we're looking at insurance. And the next day we're looking at plans for a park. And that's not only, day to day, that's literally hour by hour. And so it's great because it's diverse. One thing everyone likes to mention is people that work in the parks department, they all have ADHD because you just go. And so I have that nice little box there. I should say that chaotic little box there. The library for me is just it's awesome because the staff over there from Elise on down, they make my job so easy that, anytime that there's ever a problem, I just go running over there because it's so unique to have an actual problem at the library. And so it's enjoyable for me. And then there's the homelessness, which, if I think that parks is chaos, homelessness is just utter confusion because it's not, when a homeless person asks for help, you need to drop everything you're doing right then and there and get them the resources. It doesn't matter if you attempted to do it 50 times, 60 times. They want help right then and there. And if you don't have those resources, they're walking away. And when they walk away, they're not coming back. They tend not to come to City Hall and ask for me at 10 o'clock on a Monday morning. They come and they ask at 5:30 on a Friday. I get a call out, sometimes from our police departments. Hey, there's this guy over here. He seems a little mad, but I think you know him. So can you please come out and help us? And so it's every hour. It's every day. I've driven people out to a shelter out in Coachella Valley in the middle of the night. I've taken people, matter of fact, Christmas Eve, I think 2-3 years ago, there was a woman at the library, had nowhere to go. It might've been the day before Christmas Eve, but we got her sheltered on right before Christmas. And so That's my chaos box. That's my absolute, craziness. So I try not to let that go into the other areas, the parks and the libraries. But with that being said, homeless will use the library much more than other facilities because it's a safe place. There's
Right.
entertainment through books. There's this. They know they can go and sit at a table at the library and not be bothered for hours, and that's all they want. That's it. And
Yeah.
so that's why you'll always see some level of homelessness in all of the libraries. I worked in El
Oh, yeah.
Cajon and Vista and have seen, larger amounts of homelessness at the library. So it's impossible not to let that, kind of, knock off kilter all the other things we do in parks and in the library. But it's you got to bring the public servant and the public service type of mindset to all of them.
Yeah, they're in our community, so they are community members.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people forget that. And working at the other library that I worked at, you become. I mean, the one thing that I will tell any newcomer coming to the library is befriend your homeless. There's some that you said that have some mental disabilities, whether it's like PTSD or bipolar, whatever, that who you can't go to. But I remember, and I still say this to everybody, I was 7-8 months pregnant with my daughter. I was the one in charge at that library, and there was an unhinged man, and I had to go out there as a supervisor to step in. And the homeless people that I had befriended that knew us all every day came in, just stopped me and said, "You're going in the back, we're going to take care of it." And they did. They go, "You call 911 and we'll escort him out." And they did. All they want is safety, and they want community, and they want relationships. And that's what libraries can give them, I think, that people don't realize.
Yeah, it's it's supposed to be a comfortable place, whether you're 8 years old, whether you're 15 years old, whether you're 80 years old. It's supposed to be a place for you. And I think you hit the nail right on the head when you said they are a member of our community. Because a lot of times we'll hear, well, none of the homeless out there are from Murrieta. And that's not true. I could take you to an encampment right now where I call him a teenager. He's probably in his younger 20s right now. He graduated from the Murrieta school system here. And I know where he lives, and it's out in a area in a tent. So they do come from here. We have these rose-colored blinders on, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, in California, it's harder and harder to be able to have those blinders on. But in Murrieta, you can. But you can't overlook the fact that there are homelessness, that there's mental health challenges in this county and in this state. And so, they are members of our community, and some of them are from here.
So what would you tell the community members who kind of have those rose-colored glasses on about homelessness in their community? Like, would it be more empathy? Would it be like to call like the city for help? Maybe, somebody new that they haven't seen, because the players, the people who are here, and like you said, who've set up tents and stuff. What would you tell the community as a whole what to do about homelessness?
Well, not just what to do about, but homelessness itself is incredibly complex. I mean, if it wasn't, it would have been solved, and it's not even close to being solved at this point. It's complex because the vast majority of homeless you'll see in Murrieta are drug addicts, and it's very easy to see 10 of them over a week and then say, okay, now every homeless person must be a drug addict. But then you'll get a call like I did about 2 weeks ago. I think it was on a Thursday. Lady's house here in Murrieta burned down, and she's a COVID victim. She works in the hospitality industry. So her job is almost, zero. She's bringing home next to nothing.
Right.
She's burning through her money, no pun intended, after her house burned down, living in hotels, and she has no more money left. And unfortunately, nobody calls that first day. They wait till their money's almost all the way depleted, and it's an emergency at that point.
Yeah.
But we got her housed. She is not a drug addict. She socially drinks, and it is not, alcoholic type of drinking. So not every homeless person is a drug addict. And then there's a very well-known homeless gentleman that sits at a grocery store very close here to City Hall, or out in front of Starbucks up there. This is a gentleman that has mental challenges. He cannot live around other people. He's tried, it does not work. He's got family here, When it gets really cold, you won't see him because he's with his family, but he can only stay there for a limited period. But at the same time, he takes care of himself. He's probably the most prolific recycler you've ever seen in your life. You will see him walking down Cal Oaks with 2 huge trash bags full of recycling. So he's able to earn money. He's able to shower. He's able to take care of himself. What I don't think a lot of people in Murrieta realize how limited our resources are. We can't just go to a person who's able to take care of himself and just throw him in the back of a patrol vehicle and take him to this magical place that'll take care of all of his mental health needs. That's not how it works. That place doesn't exist in Riverside County. It probably doesn't exist in the country. And so you kind of are left with what you can do to help somebody who doesn't necessarily want help. That's probably our most challenging part in the homeless arena is what do you do with all these people? You would think living under a bridge, you would think, not having money to buy food would be rock bottom. But for some people, and especially for some drug addicts, that's not even rock bottom yet. And so what we try to do is raise up that rock bottom so they hit a little bit earlier and we can start getting them to those resources that they need. So in terms of what the community can do, yes. I mean, the answer is yes to almost everything. You can report it. You see an encampment somewhere in Murrieta, report it. And we'll go out because we want to find out who's in our neighborhood, in our community. We want to find out if there's a sexual registrant trying to set up a tent next to a school building, because we've had that in the past. We just want to make sure. And not only that, we want to go by there at least once a week to check on them to make sure they're still alive. So report those. Any business, if they're having trouble with a homeless individual, can file what's called a 602 no trespassing letter. And so that's the enforcement component of it, where we tell them you're not allowed on the property anymore. And every time we do that, there's at least 4 times we go out there before, probably 3 times that we go out and say, are you ready for services? Do you want services? And we try to hammer home, or as soon as you want services, let us know. But in Murrieta and in everywhere, the kind of the part of the solution to this is there has to be some form of enforcement. Unfortunately, some of the court decisions that we've had, then you have the AB 109, Props 47 and 57. What those have done, and it's in effect, we've taken the handcuffs off the criminals and we've put them onto our police officers. So we've limited the resources, we've limited the tools in their toolkit, and yet we still have people say, I want you to take care of this homeless problem. So we do wonders with what we have, but it's so utterly complex that we can't just snap our fingers. It's not uncommon for me to get a phone call from somebody reporting an encampment, and 3 hours later they'll call me back and they want an update of why is that encampment not gone. It's baffling to me. There has to be a little bit of sensitivity in there, but there also has to be a level of understanding that the courts have ruled that tent, whether you like it or not, is that person's house. And I can't just go into somebody's house and tell them to move. So, there's public and private property issues and things of that nature. But by and large, it takes us a little while to get services where they need to be.
Yeah. And that, how do I explain it? And some of the places that you have to take them, like you said, is Riverside. You work with cities like Temecula, and they have areas, I don't remember where it's at, but it's near Old Town, Temecula, right? That they usually do stuff out of.
Temecula Help Center. Yeah.
Thank you. So there are a lot of businesses and other cities helping try and maintain the control of who's in our communities, but it's not as simple as snapping your fingers and the problem that they see is gone. And that's something I think we have to have a little bit more empathy on and kind of put yourself in their shoes and say, it can happen to any of us at any time. And, my parents ran the food drive for, over 20 years. I mean, I spent my whole childhood back behind Station 1 filling boxes, and hearing the stories that have come out over 20 years, it literally can happen to any of us. Families, who live in La Cresta are now homeless because of, jobs going bankrupt, passing of the like the patriarchy in the family, and they're driving nice cars and have nice purses and have their nails done. All of a sudden they're like, we have no money. So it can literally happen to anybody, and you are embarrassed and you are scared and you don't know what's going on. So for people who live in our community, just to remember that, I think is a very small sliver of the puzzle.
I probably spend way too much time on this, which I have a habit of doing. But there's a great gentleman down in City of Vista. His name's Chris Megason. He runs an organization called Solutions for Change, one of the gold standards in terms of homeless services and homeless shelters. But he likes to break homelessness down into three categories. There's the have-nots, can-nots, and will-nots. The have-nots are those that they've either lost something or they never had it. It's the child who's grown up with horrible parental influences. Nobody's ever told him how to balance a checkbook. Nobody's ever told him how to write a resume. And yet when he's 18 years old, they expect him to go and live on his own. And it's a pretty tough world out there. Or it's the person who is just living paycheck to paycheck, and that medical bill comes up and they got to make the choice. Okay, do I pay this medical bill? Do I pay for my prescriptions, or do I just not pay for my car this month? And they don't pay for their car, and then their car gets towed, and then they lose their job, and it just snowballs. They're by far the easiest to help because they're looking for that hand up. But the problem is they're so hard to find because their pride stops them from coming to you. They usually wait to the absolute last minute where there is no more, they can't do it any longer. And so they're hard, or they're living, it's a family living in their cars. And yes, there are families and cars here in Murrieta. And they're just afraid that social services is going to come out and take their children. The next group is the can-nots, and that's your chronic homeless person with the mental illness walking down the street, very disheveled, very visible. So they're the easiest to find. You can go to a few streets around here, you'll find a few of them. They're the hardest to help by far because it's so expensive. Unfortunately, in Riverside County grew so fast, we never kept up with our social services. It was never funded properly. And to try to retroactively get it to the level it needs to be at is impossible. I mean, nobody wants to pay more in taxes to take care of a few homeless people or a few mentally ill people until it happens to you or your family. Then all of a sudden it's you have that jailhouse conversion almost. But it's not funded here. So mental health is difficult. We don't have anywhere to take a person with mental illness here. No. We take them up to Riverside, to ETS, and it's literally takes one of our officers off the beat for 4 hours to get up there, to get them checked in. They have to stay with them until there's a handoff and then come back. Well, that's half their shift, if not more. Right. So they're by far the hardest to help. And then the last category, which is probably the predominant, I'd say it's definitely the predominant category, is your will-nots. And that's the people, you see them around. They're not going to join up any program. They're going to deplete you of all your services. They're going to be the first to ask, but they're not going to go to an alcohol or drug rehabilitation. They're going to show up at every pantry. They'll literally know the schedule to every pantry. So they know where to get their food. They know where to panhandle. They know where to recycle. But they're not interested. They're not interested in services. Every once in a while they say they are. And it's unfortunate because they deplete our resources faster than all the other groups because they're the first to ask for help. Yes. A lot of them, the vast majority of them are drug addicts. And that's the hard part. Drug addiction, and it's part of my family, part of my life. It's very difficult to get out of drug addiction. And so I kind of have that sympathy for them. But at the same time, like I said, you're living underneath a bridge. You've hit rock bottom. Let's go ahead and recognize it and get out. So that's the three categories we like to say of homelessness.
And I did not know that. So that's really good for my job when we see them come in and, that there's three distinctive characteristics, Last question on homelessness before we move on. What are your feelings when you've helped somebody? Like, I know you and I both know a library patron who was very regular. We all knew them by their name, or we thought we knew them by their name. And they finally called for help and you got them help, and we haven't seen them since. And we keep thinking about him. What is that feeling like when you know that you've made a difference in somebody's life?
Sure. There's the reason you work for a city, and I think it's even stronger in the parks world and the library world, is you're called to this, and it's public service, and it's a public servant's heart. And so, if we weren't doing this, we would all probably be working for either a nonprofit or something else. We probably wouldn't be working on Wall Street. And so, to be just brutally honest, our success rate is not 1,000%. We're not batting, 1,000 here. We're not hitting 75% success rate. If you're working in the homeless arena, you have to have very tough skin, because those victories come few and far between. But when they do, you potentially save someone's life. We got a gentleman to a medical detox center, and we fought incredibly hard almost every day for 3 days for the county to finally open up a bed. And I thought the gentleman was going to die before we got him there, but we got him in there. I mentioned the lady on Christmas Eve. We knew she was homeless. We knew she didn't have anywhere to go. And here, Christmas is the next day, and she doesn't have anywhere to go. And so it's great. It's a great feeling. The gentleman I believe you're talking about was really interesting, because it's one of those success stories where he was living out of a car. And we got him help. Matter of fact, I before we took him to get the help that he needed, he was living near a hotel. And when I say he stunk to high heaven, it's the smell that you can't get out of your nose even after it's long gone. And I remember I went into the hotel that he was staying at. I know the owner, and I called up the owner on the phone and said, I'm going to go to your front counter and ask for a huge favor. Just please call your front counter and say, okay. And I did. And the guy is an amazing man. They let me use one of their hotel rooms just to give this guy a shower. And they gave us the key, and I said, we'll be back in about 10 minutes. About an hour and 15 minutes later, the gentleman was still in the shower. I literally went over to Target, got him a whole bunch of clothes, got him some food, came back. He was still in the shower. But we got him to a facility. And the part that when success has happened, it was kind of a sad story, but his father had passed away during that time, actually really recently, from when we got him into the facility. And so his family was actually looking for him. And nobody in the library knew he had family whatsoever. And I believe his brother came in with a photo of him and said, have you ever seen this guy before? And then I forget who it was.
All of our mouths dropped.
Yeah. And somebody called me and said, where did you take him? And I had to call the brother up and said, I know exactly where he is, which he was. I took him to one facility. It was not the right facility for him. So he went to another one, but he made contact with his family. And unfortunately, he didn't get to see his father pass away. But his family wanted him in their lives. They didn't care about mental illness. They didn't care that he was homeless for a certain period of time. They wanted him in the family, and they got him back. And so that's a good thing. And that's it definitely feels good. It's one of those things. I'll remember these. I have a lot of homeless stories, and I could probably write a book about it. But those are the things that you remember and say, at least we did something right. We did our best as a city employee, and we did our job correctly.
Yeah. And that's the very end of the day. That's what community service is all about.
Yes.
So speaking of community service and kind of segueing from homelessness over to community services, what made you interested in community services?
I literally fell into community services more than anything, and that's not unusual. A lot of people there's kind of two people in the CSD world, more so I think in parks than in libraries. But in parks, you either fall into it or there's a few people out there that are like Leah Kolick, where she lives and breathes parks and recreation, and she knew from an early age she was going into that field. And it's infectious just to be around somebody like that. And we have a lot of those in our CSD. The other half fall into it. I fell into it through vacancies and it has nothing to do with experience or education. They needed a person to fill a gap. I was available, and they said, go do that. And with CSD, that was supposed to be, 25% of my time. But just like homelessness, next thing you know, it's either 25% of your time or 25% of 200%,
Yeah.
or it's you're spending far more than 25%. And so it's funny because it becomes part of you. Like I said, over at the library, it's a little different there because there are these library service programs in college now. They weren't that prevalent a long time ago, but they are definitely more prevalent now. But a lot of it just comes down to having that you, first of all, you're called to city work. Everybody in this building, everybody at the library, everybody at the police department, the fire departments, they're called there because if they weren't, they wouldn't make it.
Right.
Everyone likes to look at the amount of money a fireman makes in one given year. Like this year, they'll scour, I forget, the Transparent California website and say,
yes.
oh my goodness, this guy made this amount of money. But they don't take into consideration the time that your dad had to go up to Northern California and stay up there for a month when he was fighting fires. They don't take into consideration our police department sometimes misses their child's, final baseball game because they have a joint mission up at the city of Hemet because we have mutual aid up there. You're called to this because there's calls. It's not uncommon once a week for me to call my wife and say, sorry, I'm going to be a little late. We're dealing with an issue. And it's just not, that doesn't just happen to me. That happens to Chief Haddon on down. It happens to Chief Lancer on down. Certainly, I know happens to Kim Summers. I mean, goodness, she's got 5 bosses that when they want an answer, rightfully so, they should get an answer and she's got to find it out. And that answer might be at 10 o'clock at night. It might be at 2 o'clock in the morning because of an issue that's out there. And so you're called to this or you won't last. So that's how I got involved over here in CSD. But again, it kind of just, it snowballs and it grows on you. It's funny because I've been at the city about 12 years. I've been in CSD, I think about 4 years now in some capacity. I'm still considered the new guy around here. I mean, you take a look at the tenure of our parks department. Oh my goodness. I think the tenure is like 15, 20 years and I'm the new guy. They'll look at me like I'm the new guy. And it's the same thing at the library. I mean, it's the loyalty to stay in the department is tremendous. And that certainly draws me to the department.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at, Leah, I'm looking at Michelle Hamilton. I worked with Jerry at the senior center. Oh my goodness. And then you look at Steve at the library. He started at the old building in I think 2001, and then you have Jolene who, did the same thing. And, I was there, left, and then came back. And I feel like I'm still the new person. Yeah. And it's like, oh my goodness. So,
but we are the keepers of kind of the history at Murrieta. Unfortunately, again, we grew so fast. And we grew fast at a time where cities were supposed to make this transition from, the old boys network and the old handshakes to these very formal, strict governmental organizations. We were very good at the handshake deals and not necessarily good at the organization. And it wasn't due to anybody's fault. It was due to, we've never been full staff. I like to point out that the city of Temecula in their CSD department, I believe they have 31 funded full-time positions. In Murrieta, we have 14.
Just drool over that number.
I think they have 3 people doing special events, and Laura Frossa will call me and say, how do they have 3 people doing the work? And she does more work than they do down there. Not to. I like the people down in Temecula, so I don't want to get in too much trouble. But
you have a good working relationship. Yeah,
exactly. But we a quick funny story as well. We're working on a deal. With a local soccer club. But we were running into some land use issues. And it all stemmed from an agreement the city had made with the environmental organization around here, RCA. And I'm talking back in 2000, maybe 2005, 2007. Well, at that time, it was Jim Holston who made the agreement. And we looked through every piece of paper and could not find what we were looking for. And so I had Leah call up Jim because he's still in town and said, can you just please beg Jim to come into a meeting? And I'll put up all the boards. I'll put it out exactly what we're looking for. And understand, Jim has been retired, I think, for 6 or 7 years now.
Right.
If in 7 years after I retire, somebody asks me to come back in, I'm going to laugh at them to think that I'm going to remember the details here.
Right.
And the funny part about it is Jim walks in, looks at everything. I explain the problem that we have and this one piece of area and say, I don't understand why this area was not in here. And literally just snapped off the answer like it was nothing, sharp as a tack, gave us the answer. And then we spent the next 45 minutes talking about, the good old days of Murrieta. And Murrieta has a lot of that. I mean, your parents over at the Historical Society are the keepers of those treasures. I mean, your whole house is filled with the old artifacts of Murrieta. There's such a fascinating history to this area that I hope never gets lost. And we're working hard on making sure that, the Historic Society has it and the Arts Commission can be that next step up into the culture of Murrieta. But it's fascinating to watch how things are done now, and however, just the glue that holds it all together. It's very fascinating.
Yeah, it's very intricate. Like,
yes,
it's almost like you need a catalog of every little piece that we don't even know it.
Yeah.
I remember those early days of like cityhood being formed, and I would not be surprised to have to call somebody up like Jim up and be like, help.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I even remember when I first got here that my first fireman's barbecue, which was awesome. It always was a huge party, but there was a hole dug in the ground and they threw some meat in it.
Oh, I miss those days.
And not only that, it was a city backhoe would do the meat. And I remember sitting there the first time, and I was with Rick Dudley at the time. I'm looking at it saying, hey, I don't think we're supposed to be doing this. Like, this isn't how you do things. That the health department shows up, but nobody ever got sick back then. It was that, and that's how you do cook very good meat. You dig a hole in the ground, you put the meat in there, and you cover it back up.
Really the best.
Unfortunately, at some point, the health department came in and told us we weren't allowed to do that anymore.
I think we did it before the health department came in. I think we were like, oh, right. Snap. I'll have to ask my dad. I think he was like, we're pushing it pretty thin. Let's change it.
Yes.
I remember the smoker was built extremely quickly, like the turnaround. Yeah. It was him. Was it Richard Kern? I'll have to ask. And I think like Dylan, I forgot which firefighters were helping him. And I'm like, wait, no more pit barbecue? Gosh.
Yeah. But they built it right in the back of the fire station 1, I believe it was. Yeah. They bought the trailer
just built it
and built everything.
And it was just as good. So, so going back, because you said library and Parks and Recreation are two completely different entities, but it's umbrellaed and you're the one holding under that. What's it like managing two? I mean, I don't know. Every time I think of community services, Parks and Rec, right, and library, I think of Parks and Rec, the TV show. And like, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but like Leslie Knope.
Yes, one of my favorite shows.
Yeah, Leah is Leslie, but I forgot the librarian's name on the show, but I laughed so hard in both fields going, yeah, duh. But how is it hold that umbrella with that kind of at stake?
There's some distinctions between the two, but by and large, there's probably way more similarities than there are these differences. And so if you concentrate on that, you're fine. And yes, Parks and Rec is probably one of my funniest shows, at least most enjoyable to watch. And hopefully that doesn't make me Ron Swanson. But it's, if you talk about the similarities first, the loyalty of the staff. Both departments. Here's another little story for you. My father unfortunately got sick about 3 weeks ago, and I had to fly back to Philadelphia to go see him. And it was last minute. I think I bought my plane ticket on a Friday, and I flew out on Sunday. No warning whatsoever. So I just sent an email out to Stacy, our boss, and Elise and Leah, and said, "Hey, I'm gone all next week." The great part about both CSD and the library is the staff, because Leah and Elise have things dialed in. And so I went away for a week, and there may have been 3 emails that I had to respond to that week. And it's, as somebody supervising that, you can't express how much that means to a person. So I got to take my dad to all of his doctor's appointments, and he's doing much better now. But I was able to fully concentrate on that 1 week that I was there and make the most out of it without any interruptions whatsoever. I would not trade the staff here, and I work with a lot of different cities. I wouldn't trade my staff in CSD and library with any other city out there, not only in our area, in the entire state of California. I mean, it's as with any organization, I'm sure there's a few that I would probably try to horse trade, but I think every organization has those. But in all seriousness, the departments, you could not get any better. Both departments in Murrieta are used to working on shoestring budgets. It's the fact of the matter. Murrieta put way too many homes up, does not have enough industry to be able to carry the load for the sales tax generation portion of it. And so we'll always struggle. There's no way about it. And so we have to make we have to make concessions everywhere we are. We have to say no to a lot of things that people really want us to do. But we do our best with what we have. And that's why when we have the Santa Stars, the vast majority of people come out of the woodwork to volunteer for that. I mean, we have, I forget how many people played Santa last year, but it was probably 20 different people in the community that played Santa.
4 routes. You have what, 4
days of 3 routes. Yeah. So it's an incredible amount.
Yeah.
So,
and that's not an easy event to do, because
goodness, no. No, but it also goes to show you that, we get the job done, and that happens both in CSD and it happens in library. And then there's some of the obstacles that we share in common is most of the staff, all except for a few in Parks Department, are located outside City Hall. And so that gives you a disadvantage if you're trying to figure out something, a budget related question or insurance or HR related question. You're not there, so you don't have that personal relationship with the person. And that makes it very difficult. I mean, it's easier for me to go upstairs and say, hey, we're just finding out where this is in the process here. Whereas you won't have that same relationship be able to do it. It's an obstacle. It takes more time. So some of the differences, hours of operation are a little bit different. You guys work very concise set of hours where you throw a special event in on CSD and it's all hands on deck. Everybody's out there. And so it's Fridays, it's holidays, it's Veterans Day, all the time. Another similarity is we all get to work with some very colorful and interesting members of the public.
Yes.
And that makes it interesting. And then we love in Murrieta. It's kind of funny because our elected officials, very rarely does somebody come from out of nowhere to become a city council member. Usually they're well-known members. They've been part of boards. They've been to every, they volunteered for special events. So there's usually no surprises. We know everybody. It's not uncommon for a library staff member or a park staff to get a phone call from a council member. And typically that should go through, your city manager, down to the department head, down to the appropriate staff. But because there's this small town feel to Murrieta, and it still remains this way, they'll reach out right directly to us. I remember one time,
was a great library patron.
Yeah. I remember one of our council members forgot his library card, and the person did not recognize him. And he
knew it was a week. They were a week into the job.
Yes. Literally pointed to his photo on the wall and said, "Don't you know who I am?" And not as a you will do this for me now, but it's, goodness, I've been in this community for X number of years. I use a library all the time with my kids. Let me check out this book. Goodness.
Yes, it was literally a Band-Aid ripoff moment for that person.
Yes.
They're like, I didn't know. I'm like, oh my gosh, literally third day on the desk by yourself. Here you go.
Yep. And that falls under the, every day is a little bit different. There's always something that pops up where you're just like, okay, and you just move on. So there's some differences, but especially between library and the parks department, there's probably way more similarities than there are differences.
Yeah, as somebody who has both feet, or had both feet, because I used to work, it's very true. And not now, but like back in the day when I went over there, I see library as like a recce. And like, that's not how we do things over here. And I'm like, oh, but it's changing,
Yes.
Like, I feel like we should tell our library assistants who work like in children's, like we shouldn't call you library assistants. We should call you program bouncers or storytime bouncers, because you're having to hold the doors closed because of story time overcapacity and overflowing performers during summer, line A, line B, and that's where my recreation experience kicks in, and I'm like, I got you. So it's very similar in the fact that we all care about our community and working with others. I think I worked with 4 other cities. This is the best city. I mean, really great. The amount of great people that we serve versus those not so nice people. I mean, obviously everybody fixates on the negative, but
it's every single I do it with homelessness. We do it with every special event out there. We'll have 100 compliments. Absolutely. But the only one we can remember is that one who said, my iced tea wasn't cold enough.
Exactly.
And that's what we remember. And I think that's part of, again, being the public servant, because you try to do everything, you try to set that bar so high and exceed it every single time, that when it doesn't happen for anyone, and the vast majority of the complaints that we get come from a relatively few amount of people that complain about everything. But it breaks our heart to hear the complaints. And I'll never tell a resident that they shouldn't complain, but it's like, goodness, if you saw what that did to everyone at the library who does, the story times or especially the summer reading program, or Leah and her staff and Laura Frasso, if you knew when you start making fun of the band, the one band that you didn't like out of 10 years, yet there were 16 other bands during that time period that everybody enjoyed, but you want to fixate on that one, man, that breaks Laura's heart. And you feel bad for her. So it's just part of living in this world. It really is.
Don't break all of us Leslie Nopes in half, please.
Yes.
Look at how upset she gets. That's how we all are.
Yes.
But what I really appreciate about you is that you as a manager are also a library patron. We talked about Randon, who is now in DC, but he was a council member. He was always an active library patron with his family. You are no exception. I remember being at the desk swamped, and somebody's asking me and I'm being pulled, and all of a sudden I hear you go, I'll show her. And then you take her. I'm like, oh, thank you. And that's what I really value out of you. And you've done tours. You've stepped in and helped us do tours. I want to know, what is your outlook on library related services, and if there was any misconceptions that's changed since helping us?
I don't think there's many misconceptions, solely because my sister was a librarian for a short time.
Yeah,
she was. And so
so you've heard it all.
But I also, when I was very young, here I'm going to go on another story and another tangent. When I was young, I loved the library. My mom was a voracious reader. I mean, she every day, I remember coming home, she was reading a book. And we lived back in Philadelphia. And I remember she would go and buy these just bundles of books. We'd go to Atlantic Book Warehouse. And she'd let me tag along when I was very young. And I'd be buying these books. I remember one time, my goodness, going back years, probably 3rd, 4th grade, the days of the old bookmobile came to our elementary school. And I told my mom and said, hey, I bought some books, so you have to go down and pay for them. And this is 1979. I think the bill came out to $50, which would be hundreds of dollars today.
Right.
I just remember my mom looking and saying, no, you don't need the book on snakes. You don't need the books on, and just started, let's get this down to a reasonable, amount. And I remember I would ride 2 miles to the Ambler Public Library. And for some reason, I just always enjoyed it. I would actually, beg, borrow, and steal money from my mom there was an ice cream store right next to it. And I would have my friends go and I'd buy them ice cream, but they had to go to the library with me. And none of them enjoyed that part whatsoever. And so I have no idea, but I always enjoyed it. But I also, here comes kind of the we're going to pull on some heartstrings. I remember when I was in 9th grade, and the school system back in Philadelphia, just outside of Philadelphia, is, it's probably not as nice as it is nowadays. But I remember we were in 9th grade and we were reading the book Great Expectations. And every time the teacher had a question, I had the answer. I mean, it's Pip and Miss Halversham, and it was such an awesome book to read. And I remember looking around, and all of my friends in the class were like, dude, what are you doing? What is wrong with you?
Yeah.
And I remember it was almost a bullying moment where I said, okay, I'll just stop reading. And I did for years and years.
Oh no.
I kind of skated through, I probably shouldn't admit it, but I skated through my early years, especially my high school years. But I probably did not pick up a book after ninth grade. And I mean, I read right through, the Outsider series, all these books, and then just stopped. And so it wasn't until I went back to college. I went to college, I stopped for a while and went back. So probably when I was 25, where I caught up. And that's when when I went to grad school. Matter of fact, I probably owe the library, its due part in my marriage. When I was in grad school, my wife and I met in grad school. We were really good friends for a long period, but the graduate school allowed students to, I say rent out, but you didn't pay any money, but you could reserve your own room in the library. And it was a concrete wall, no window, probably, goodness, maybe 8x8 area.
Yeah.
My wife's was right next to mine. And so I went to school in Virginia Beach, but it was about 30 minutes away from the beach, and I lived at the beach. And so it was too far to drive between classes. And so I'd go to class, and I'd stay there all day long, and I'd stay in the library, and I would just read as much as I possibly could. And to this day, I love it. I mean, if you took a look at my library list, you'd probably think I was a professor in Civil War history or something. But it's just something, I think my mom started that. She enjoyed reading. I enjoyed reading. And I hope to be able to pass that along to my children who, if their reading list is anything, to show about it, they're definitely taking at it as well. So,
I love seeing the whole family in there.
Yeah. So I love libraries. There are no real misconceptions, just because, it's kind of part of us. It's part of our lives.
Yeah, I grew up as a reluctant reader, but my dad read. So I came in with a whole slew of misconceptions. And even though my cousin was a librarian, I came in going, oh my gosh, you guys don't shush people, and all that kind of stuff. And coming in with a recreation background, so it's nice to have like a manager have that experience, back there. Because if you're going to manage a library, you have to have library experience. You have to be a reader. You have to enjoy like the intellectual freedom that comes with libraries. So it's really nice having that. And like I said, just seeing you come in with your family and being a participant with our community, it just, it shows other like community families like this.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important to the city. And that's something that us staff like really value. So as we finish up, I really want to know how important is community services to the community, and how can residents take more advantage of it? Those of us who are in the city but really don't participate or really don't know too much about it, like how would you get them more involved?
I mean, it's any given day, week, not necessarily in this COVID world. But there's always something between the library and CSD. I mean, this upcoming weekend, depending on when this airs, we have our Halloween laser light show. First time we're going to do that. If you have children, get them involved in a summer reading program. There's always something, just look up Facebook, look up, CSD in the library, and you'll find plenty of ways to get involved. I think it's hard because Murrieta is such a commuter area. A lot of people are driving down to San Diego or out to Orange County every day. And so, they need their information kind of force fed to them, not because they're lazy, because they're so busy.
No. Yeah.
And so it's hard when you're on the road and you have to sit in that traffic, 3 hours out of the day, there and back. It makes it really difficult. And so, there's always the programs that we do, which are great, and you can get involved that way. And a lot of people do. I mean, the vast majority of the people that we see, we're doing, I don't know how many tens of thousands, it's well over 15,000 probably people at the birthday bash every year. And every year it's the same people that you see there, these people that have been coming for, since the inception of the city. And so it's wonderful to see.
They set up chairs at like 8:00 in the morning and they fence their spots off and
Yep. And we let them. I mean, I remember that was one of my big things is one of the things our CSD department, especially special events, hates about me the most is I have this love relationship with special events because we do them very well with the resources that we have.
Yes.
And so every special event goes through the same exact circle with me. It's me meeting with Laura and Leah, months before,
Yeah.
and saying, have you thought about all these things? And they lay out the general guidelines. We end the meeting and I say, well, you're the professionals. You guys know what you're doing. So go ahead and do that. And then about a week or two before the meeting, I start peppering them with the questions. Have you thought about the trash? Have you thought about parking? Have you thought about traffic control? And they humor me by saying, yeah, we thought about that. It's the same exact thing they did the year before. And they humor me, but it's that day of the event, which I tend to be I tell everyone I delegate, but I'm a micromanager. And so it's that day I show up, and that's when I cause chaos. I want to know, who's taking care of the trash out on the field, right? Tell me who's got the keys to everything. Where are the toilets? We need to make sure, and everything's already taken care of. And then the event ends and everybody gets together and it's like, wow, 15,000 people came through. They listened to 2 concerts. Their kids played on the rides all day long. The fire truck showed up and thousands of kids got hosed down by a fire truck, and everything went smoothly.
And then the fireworks happen at night, and then it just progresses all day long.
Yeah. And I don't think many people realize that, again, we have all of Parks Department 14 people. Yeah. And that there's part-timers that are not included in that number, but by and large, this is Laura Frasso who's putting all of this together. She gets an amazing amount of help from Jerry Copeland and from Joey Eccles and from all the coordinators and from Leah. But it comes down to one person spending just a tremendous amount of hours. And it's the same thing with the summer reading program. I've brought my children to some of the events over there. And, I'm the one that walks in and I want to, hey, are we up against the fire code? Because you'll go into some of these meetings and you'll look around and you'll say, hey, that sign over there says 120 people. And I know I'm looking at about 175 right now.
That's no longer happening.
Well, we've increased the number that were allowable in the room. Yes. So we took care of it that way. Yes. But it's the tremendous amount of programs that we have around here. Everybody can certainly get involved. And then for homeless, once a year, I don't think we're doing it this year solely because of COVID, but once in a year, there is a voluntary point in time count where we're mandated by the federal government. We have to go out and we have to interview homeless that we come in contact with. And so I take members of the public and I'll put them with a police officer and a little group and tell them exactly where to go. And they go and they interview. And then there's a lot of other ways that people can help as well. So we try to take the onus off of them of having to find these things to do for their kids and spoon feed it through the social media and say, here's some great ways for you to get involved. And not only that, we have some of the most elite competitive and recreation leagues in all of Southern California. I mean, you look at Murrieta Surf Soccer, they are the top level soccer organization in California. A lot of people don't know that. You take a look at Pony and Little League. I mean, these are all the coaches are from right here in Murrieta.
Once again, ownership.
We have a one of the people who work over at the fire department. Her husband used to play professional baseball, a minor league team, but he played professional baseball. I believe he's a coach over there. So we don't lack the talent out here. We have that. And we try to keep our fields to a standard that we like to think is top notch, at least, compared to some of the other cities around us. So there's an amazing amount of ways for people to get involved.
Yeah. And, our staff on both ends might be small, or our budgets might be small, but we've been doing this for decades.
Yes.
And, we're, not to toot our own horns, but we are good at what we do. So take advantage of it.
I'm huge on analytics and it probably drives Elise and everybody at the library as well as the Parks Department absolutely nuts. But I want to know how many pieces of material are checked out of the library, how many are coming in, how many new cards. And I don't have the number right off the top of my head, but I want to say, I might be off on this one, but something in the field of 350,000 items are checked out of the Murrieta Public Library a year.
Yeah.
It's such a tremendous amount of material. And not only that, if you look at the statistics, we have a lot more people that borrow material from our library, but it's returned to another library. That's unique. And when you really dig through the information, you find out people are coming from, upwards of Corona, past Sun City. They're passing 3 and 4 libraries to come to our library to get the information they need, but it's not that, because they could just order it and have it there in their library the following week. They're coming for the service. They're coming for the programs. We are unique in that. I don't think that's happening, in a lot of different libraries that are out there, but because we have our own staff, we're not contracted. I think it's a lot different, and people come to expect a certain level at our library, and we're outgrowing it. I wish we could build a bigger one, but I
think we have outgrown. But there's I was in an outreach workshop a few years ago, and when they found out I was from Murrieta, they immediately said, "Oh, I need to talk to you. There's a regular family who stopped coming because they drive all the way up to you guys." And this was in Encinitas.
Yep.
And they were coming for, at the time, our Play and Learn, which is this huge preschool program. And it's exhausting, but also very thrilling to watch like these kids have fun for like an hour. And, they pass counties to come to us. And they're like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, no." So
it's that taking ownership. We're going to a full circle here. It's taking ownership, because we have the same exact issue with our sports leagues here. To play on the fields, to be a Murrieta surf soccer team or a pony ball or Friday Night Lights, your roster has to be, the vast majority have to be residents.
Yeah.
And when it's constant that number starts dipping lower and lower, because people live in our neighboring cities, but they want to take part in Murrieta Surf. They don't want to take part in their soccer club in their area. And unfortunately, there starts to be these little, it's almost a shell game, because they know that their numbers are going down. They still want to take the kids in, because, you don't want a kid not to play where he wants to play. It's fascinating that people will come from far, far away to our resources. And I think we deserve to take a little bit of pride in that. So,
it's very rewarding to make a difference in so many people's lives. It's just sad that we can't keep up, when you just want to like snap your finger and the story time room is built, or snap another finger and you have more staff so we can accommodate all these people we're turning. I mean, not spring, because that's when we closed. Fall, I turned around almost 300 story time people in just 8 weeks. I turned away 300 people. Just for story time.
It's like that. Matter of fact, we just had a little budget exercise where, we put in what basically would be our budget priority list in case any funding comes available, and there probably won't be with our COVID world that we're living in. But it's always hard in CSD and the library, because in the planning department, it's if you're going to ask for anything, it's going to be people. It might be a general plan update or some kind of a study, but by and large, you're just asking for bodies. Whereas we're asking for bodies, we're asking for programs, we're asking for facilities. I mean, I got a roof that's not doing too well over at the community center, and we're sitting here going, "Hey, we might have to close this thing down." We have, the minute we build the story time room, which is going to come at a cost of well plus $1 million. It's already going to be overfilled. The day we build it, it'll be overfilled. Many people don't know Murrieta has an equestrian park over on Hayes Avenue. I need about $10 million to make that a serious competitive facility. And we don't have close to that. And unfortunately, we're watching some of the buildings there deteriorate, and it solely comes down to a funding issue. I could build a gym for the youth center, and it would be over. There was a point it was obviously before COVID. I think it was a year before COVID. The youth center itself was getting close to averaging 150 youth a day right after school, that 2:30 period to 6 p.m. period, 150. I have 4 staff over there. We have some part-timers that are there, but you start getting to the point where you say, okay, it's starting to get a little dangerous. Luckily, the kids in Murrieta are just absolutely great. But as soon as we build a facility, we can start building the new one because it's going to be packed. I don't have enough sports fields. I mean, the last fields we built here were Los Alamos Hills Sports Park.
And that was what, 2006, 2007,
When we opened it, yep.
Yeah.
No, we opened.
It was
It
2000.
opened in about 2008. I think,
2005?
because I
Oh.
just got here. No, I think it opened
okay.
in around 8.
I can't remember when I left senior center over the library, if I had worked it or if I didn't. I don't even know. I don't even know anymore. But I should just tell you how long ago it was. It was well over 13 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So as we close, I'd like to ask you, what is your favorite city hosted event? Because there's so many great ones.
Sure. And as you know, I always preface it with that, you know, the love relationship I have with special events. It's
take your micromanager out and just put your enjoyment
when
hat
you're
on
the park side or even on the library side, when you have the special events, it's just not fun anymore because there's just so much planning that goes in. You know, we like to, Leah always says what we are is ducks. You know, on the top, you see us on the surface and we look calm, cool, and collected. And underneath the water, we are paddling like you've never seen before. So, you know, we don't get to enjoy them like a lot of other people do. But, you know, that being said, we have our own fun and blow off steam our own ways.
Yeah.
I would say, you know, Birthday Bash is probably on the tops of everybody's list just because it's so unique. It's grown so much. We still try to keep that really small town community feel. It's getting really hard to keep that when you have 115,000 people here and you're still growing. So there's the Father's Day car show. There was a time when we used to do a father-son car show the day before. We've moved the Father's Day car show because a lot of people don't realize. We got some complaints about moving the Father's Day car show because it was always on Father's Day. I don't think what most residents realized is I have entire staff that have been here for a generation that have never been able to celebrate with their fathers.
Right.
Because they work here and they stay working here and they have to miss it because it's an all hands on deck event. And so they've never got to spend
all day. I don't think people
all
realize
day, whether it's 115 degrees as it's been or whether it was cold like it was the last time we did it. But we've moved it to the night before. What we used to do is Father's Day on Father's Day, and then we had a little special component with father's sons that build a car together the night before. I always thought that was really unique and really cool. You know, there's the fireman's barbecue is always a fun time for my family because I have no involvement in that whatsoever other than I get to show up every once in a while. You know, I'll be guilt ridden into having to serve the food for 1 hour. But by and large, I just get to sit back with my family and go and have some good barbecue. And then, of course, Veterans Day. Goodness, if the military members in Murrieta would crucify me if I didn't mention Veterans Day. We have the largest Veterans Day parade in, I would say, all of Southwest Riverside. I would probably go so far as say all of Riverside. It's huge.
It's huge, like 2 hour long, maybe.
Yep. We're trying to make accommodations this year. Obviously, we can't hold a parade. COVID. It's a very sad thing. I know we're going to get a lot of complaints about it because people want to see Veterans Day. I will say Laura is doing what she does best, and she is working on an alternative, at least some type of a flyover or something like that, where we could still go out and celebrate Veterans Day because this community has, goodness, per capita, probably more veterans and enlisted military members than any other community out there. Very strong military community. And so we'll have to do something. And I know she's also working on something to show. We've been getting very adept, as you have, at the social media and doing the story times, doing these types of things, and people seem to enjoy them. So we did a video for our new B Street Park that just opened,
which was awesome.
It all started with Memorial Day. Laura Frosso put together a video for Memorial Day that just, you know, it's kind of one of those, you're always you do something successful and they just want you the next, 5 things have to even top that. And so I always tell Laura that sometimes she's going to have to drop something to lower the expectation because the Memorial Day video was just absolutely phenomenal. And so she's expected now that Veterans Day, she's going to have to do better than that. And that's going to be tough to do.
Laura could do it.
Well, I know she
Let me
can,
do
but there
it.
comes a point where, she's going to be flying a plane or a helicopter. It's going to get so, Leslie Nope-ish, where she's doing something that's so outlandish
Yeah.
because somebody wants her to do this huge thing.
Yeah, but she's a community servant. She's like, okay,
Yep.
that's what happens is you go here. And then if you go, oh, I'm tired, like the
Yep.
library took a step back because we just couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
We weren't doing our library services, and people are like, what happened? What's going on? I'm like, okay, we'll go up higher, and you just keep
Yes.
going. And
Which I don't think a lot of people out there, and if I could, express to anyone listening, I don't think they understand the staff in parks and the library are unique in that when we're used to putting together programs and then we see this thing, we put together this big production and it takes a month long of planning. And then we put it out there and people come and it's stressful and we say, we're never going to do this again. But then it happens and everything goes great. But we get these victories constantly.
Mhm.
The COVID world we're living in is different. The staff isn't getting that victory any longer.
Yeah.
And mentally, it's beating us up over here at parks, over at the library. So I make it a point of I try to tell everybody as much as possible, check on your coworker, ask them how they're doing, because they're going to shake their head and say, oh, everything's
we're
okay.
fine.
Yeah, we're just getting through it. But everybody's dealing with the same homeschooling. Everybody's dealing with the childcare issues. Everybody's dealing with the family members that you don't want to get sick. There's this expectation the library opens up soon, which probably will.
Yeah.
However, that means people are going to come in and we'll open it up when we know there's safeguards that our employees aren't going to get sick. We're just not willing, to have somebody, because if somebody gets sick, it could spread. And we want to make sure we're as safe as possible. And when we do open, we know, and the residents will be able to know, we did everything we possibly could to plan for this and that their children will be safe in that building because of the work that we put in.
Yeah.
I mean, I know already from the committee that's over there that the planning document is getting to be, enough to fill into a 3-ring binder, which is great.
I just joined that committee at the library because Allison, our children's librarian, went on maternity leave. Oh, she's so beautiful. Anyway,
yes.
My first day on the committee, and I was like, what am I doing here? You have it all covered.
Yep.
In the stack. And that's what it is. We want our families to come back and we want them to be safe.
Yep.
We want them back. But we want to be safe. And if one of us goes down because it spreads through the library, we are sitting ducks.
Yep.
You will see us upside down with our feet going like this because we are already pushing ourselves. How I explain it, but we are always so busy that even on a normal pre-COVID day, somebody calls out, we are doing 3 things at once.
Yep.
And we're adding the additional protection and still doing curbside and everything that we want to make sure we're all safe, patrons just as much. We want to make sure that they have their library again.
And hopefully it'll be sooner than later. And nobody enjoys this time period. I haven't met a single person who enjoys it. So, like I said, we'll come back. We'll come back as strong as ever. I think everybody wants to see the people come in. Over in the Parks Department, Jerry Copeland does an unbelievable job with the senior food program every Friday that goes through the loop. She gets to see the people that used to come into the library and have their food there on a regular basis. The library, we were one of the first libraries to open up the curbside service.
We opened
and people
back in
came
May.
from all over.
Yeah.
And so we at least get to see somebody in a car. They might not come in, they might not be able to enjoy a program, but they're coming and they're doing things. And I think some of the innovative programs done over at the library, the book packs, the things like that, it just goes to show you that you take this away from us, that's fine. We're filling it. We're going to do our job. You're not going to stop.
Libraries are very resilient, and not at our library specific, but you look at libraries throughout the world, and libraries are usually the first to get cut. And they just still keep going, it's like you chop us off at the knees, but we just keep walking. And that's no different. So, and it's because we have good management. We have Elise, we have Brian, we have Stacy, we have Kim, everybody who really understands and values libraries and parks and recreation. So Murrieta is very lucky to have
absolutely
all of you guys. So I appreciate it. Anything else you want to add before we close?
I think that is it. Hopefully, hopefully that comes across as us doing as much as we possibly can.
Hopefully, hopefully it showed how much we Parks and Rec, like Leslie Knope it, and we're not Ron Swanson.
100%. Yes.
We might act like him sometimes, but we are all Leslie Nopes. So, but thank you, Brian. I really appreciate it so much for you taking your time out of your busy day to interview for the library and explain to our community how much we appreciate them.
No problem. Definitely an honor to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.